The sun was just beginning to rise over the historic streets of London, casting a golden glow on the cobblestones and illuminating the grandeur of Buckingham Palace. Tourists from all corners of the globe had already started gathering around the famous landmark, eager to witness one of Britain's most iconic traditions, the changing of the guard ceremony. Among the bustling crowd stood Karen, an American woman visiting the UK for the very first time. With her camera slung around her neck and an oversized tote bag filled with essentials, she looked like any other excited tourist. But there was something about Karen that set her apart, her unshakable belief in being prepared for anything. Karen wasn't new to traveling, but she always approached it with caution. Back home in Texas, where wide-open spaces and independent living were part of everyday life, she developed habits that reflected her personality: practical, resourceful, and sometimes overly cautious. Her purse was practically a survival kit, stocked with items ranging from bottled water and granola bars to sunscreen, tissues, and even a small flashlight. But nestled deep inside her bag, tucked away behind her wallet and travel maps, was her prized possession: a small canister of pepper spray. To Karen, this tiny tool wasn't just a precaution. It was peace of mind in a world full of unknowns. As the clock ticked closer to the ceremony's start time, Karen maneuvered through the throng of people, trying to find a spot close enough to see the guards clearly. The air buzzed with excitement as families posed for photos, children giggled, and vendors shouted offers for souvenirs. Despite the cheerful atmosphere, Karen couldn't shake off a nagging sense of unease. She scanned the area carefully, her eyes darting between the towering gates of the palace and the stoic figures standing guard outside. Something about those guards made her feel uneasy. The Queen's guards were impossible to miss. Their striking red tunics and towering bearskin hats commanded attention, exuding an aura of authority and tradition. They stood perfectly still, their faces expressionless, as if carved from stone. For many tourists, these guards were fascinating symbols of British history and discipline. But for Karen, they felt different, too quiet, too rigid. As she watched them, her imagination began to wander. Why didn't they move? Why didn't they react when someone accidentally bumped into them, or when a pigeon landed near their feet? Were they real humans, or some kind of advanced mannequins designed to impress visitors? Her thoughts grew darker as she lingered near one particular guard stationed closer to the crowd. He seemed to be staring straight ahead, his rifle resting against his shoulder. His unwavering gaze sent chills down Karen's spine. Was he looking at her, or was she imagining things? Her heart raced as she tried to convince herself that everything was fine. Still, the longer she stared at him, the more her paranoia took hold. What if he snapped out of his trance-like state and did something unexpected? What if his rifle wasn't just ceremonial? The question swirled in her mind, amplifying her anxiety. Karen tightened her grip on her purse, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of the pepper spray. She reminded herself why she carried it: to protect herself in case of danger. But now, surrounded by hundreds of peaceful tourists and majestic architecture, she wondered if she was overreacting. Just as doubt crept in, the guard shifted slightly, adjusting his stance. The sunlight caught the barrel of his rifle, sending a bright flash directly toward Karen's eyes. That was it, the final straw. In that split second, fear overpowered logic, and Karen's instincts kicked in. Unbeknownst to her, this fleeting moment would soon spiral into a situation far beyond what she could have ever imagined. A bright flash of sunlight reflecting off the guard's rifle sent Karen's heart pounding like a drum. Her breath quickened, and her mind raced with irrational thoughts. To her, that simple movement felt deliberate, almost threatening. The once fascinating sight of the stoic guard now seemed menacing, his towering figure casting a shadow over her sense of security. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. Karen's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse as she glanced nervously at the people around her. Everyone else appeared calm, snapping photos and chatting excitedly. No one else seemed to notice, or care about the guard's presence. But Karen couldn't unsee what she thought she saw. Her imagination spiraled out of control. What if he wasn't just standing there for show? What if this was some elaborate setup? She had heard stories about pickpockets and scammers targeting tourists in crowded areas. Could this be something worse? Her grip on reality began to slip, replaced by fear-driven assumptions. Her eyes darted back to the guard. He hadn't moved again, but his stillness only deepened her unease. It was unnatural, almost robotic. Was he even human? Karen's mind conjured up wild scenarios. Maybe he was a decoy, or perhaps he was waiting for the perfect moment to act. She didn't know much about British customs, but she'd always been taught to trust her instincts. And right now, her instincts were screaming at her to do something, anything, to protect herself. Without fully realizing what she was doing, Karen reached into her purse and wrapped her hand around the familiar shape of her pepper spray. It was a reflex, born from years of carrying it as a precaution. Back in Texas, she'd never hesitated to pull it out during late-night walks or when encountering stray dogs on her morning jogs. This situation felt no different to her, an unfamiliar threat looming closer than she cared to admit. Time seemed to slow down as Karen pulled the small canister from her bag. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve hardened. If this guard posed any danger, she wasn't going to wait around to find out. Before she could second-guess herself, she pointed the nozzle in his direction and pressed down on the trigger. A fine mist shot through the air, catching the guard squarely in the face. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The guard, who moments ago had stood as immovable as a statue, suddenly staggered backward, coughing violently. His rifle clattered to the ground as he raised his hands to shield his eyes. The crowd gasped in unison, their cheerful chatter turning into shocked cries. Tourists scrambled to get out of the way, unsure of what was happening. Parents pulled their children close, while others whipped out their phones to capture the chaos unfolding before them. Karen froze, her arms still extended, the pepper spray dangling limply from her fingers. The realization of what she'd done hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't a stray dog or a suspicious stranger on a dark street. This was a member of the Queen's Guard, a symbol of British tradition and discipline. And she had just attacked him. Her cheeks flushed hot with embarrassment and panic. "Oh no," she whispered under her breath, her voice barely audible over the commotion around her. The guard continued to cough, his body racked with pain as tears streamed down his face. Security personnel rushed to his side, shouting orders and trying to restore order to the scene. Meanwhile, all eyes turned to Karen. Some glared at her accusingly, while others looked on in disbelief. One elderly woman muttered loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "What on earth is wrong with her?" The words stung, but Karen barely registered them. Her mind was consumed with guilt and regret. How could she have let her fear spiral so completely out of control? As the seconds ticked by, the gravity of the situation settled over her. She had come to London to experience its rich history and culture, not to create a scene that would likely end up on international news. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of Buckingham Palace grounds, surrounded by chaos of her own making. The irony wasn't lost on her. That tiny canister of pepper spray, meant to keep her safe, had instead turned her trip into a disaster. And as palace security began moving toward her, Karen knew her day was about to take an even darker turn. Karen's return to London was a mix of nerves and determination. As the taxi wound its way through the familiar streets, her heart raced with every landmark they passed. Big Ben, the Thames River, and finally, the grand gates of Buckingham Palace came into view. Each sight brought back memories of that chaotic morning. The cheering crowd, the stoic guards, and the moment her fear spiraled out of control. But this time, Karen was different. She wasn't the same woman who had let panic dictate her actions. This visit was about proving to herself that she could face her fears and move forward with humility. When she arrived at the palace grounds, Karen hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the cab. The air felt crisp, just as it had months ago, but there was a newfound calm in her demeanor. She left her oversized purse at the hotel this time. No pepper spray, no unnecessary items weighing her down. All she carried was her camera and a small notebook where she planned to jot down reflections from her day. Taking a deep breath, she joined the throng of tourists gathering near the changing of the guard ceremony. The scene was much like before: families snapping photos, children laughing, and vendors calling out their wares. Yet to Karen, everything seemed brighter, more vibrant. Gone was the haze of paranoia that had clouded her judgment last time. Instead, she marveled at the precision and discipline of the guards, their red tunics standing out against the gray stone of the palace. They moved with quiet elegance, performing their duties with an unwavering sense of duty. For the first time, Karen truly appreciated the beauty of the tradition she had once misunderstood. As the ceremony unfolded, Karen found herself drawn to one particular guard stationed closer to the crowd. Her pulse quickened when she realized it was the same man she had pepper-sprayed months earlier. His posture was as rigid as ever, his expression unreadable behind his polished exterior. Karen's stomach churned with guilt and anxiety. Should she approach him? Would he even want to speak to her after what had happened? Summoning every ounce of courage, Karen decided to take the risk. Slowly, she made her way toward him, careful not to disrupt the ceremony or draw attention to herself. When she was close enough, she stopped and waited patiently until a brief lull allowed her to speak. "Excuse me," she began softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you probably don't remember me, but I'm Karen." The guard turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. There was no anger in his gaze, only curiosity. After a pause, he nodded almost imperceptibly, acknowledging her presence. Emboldened by his response, Karen continued, "I wanted to thank you for forgiving me. What I did was wrong, and I'll never forget how patient you were that day. You taught me so much without saying a word." For a moment, the guard said nothing, maintaining the stoic demeanor expected of his role. Then, surprising both himself and Karen, he gave a slight nod and murmured, "It takes strength to admit mistakes. Thank you for coming back." His words were simple, yet they carried immense weight. Tears welled up in Karen's eyes as relief washed over her. In that fleeting exchange, she felt a profound sense of closure, not just for the incident itself, but for the journey it had sparked within her. Afterward, Karen wandered through the palace grounds, taking in the sights with fresh eyes. She watched as visitors admired the architecture, snapped selfies with the guards from a respectful distance, and soaked in the rich history surrounding them. No longer burdened by fear or self-doubt, Karen felt a deep connection to the place and to the people around her. She realized that travel wasn't just about seeing new things. It was about learning, growing, and embracing the unknown with an open heart. By the end of the day, Karen sat on a bench overlooking the palace, penning notes in her journal. She wrote about forgiveness, resilience, and the importance of facing one's past. Most importantly, she reflected on how far she had come since that fateful morning. What had started as a humiliating mistake had transformed into a powerful lesson about fear, judgment, and redemption. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Buckingham Palace, Karen smiled to herself. She wasn't the same person who had arrived in London months ago, and for the first time in a long while, she felt proud of who she had become. Months had passed since the infamous incident at Buckingham Palace, and Karen's life had changed in ways she never could have predicted. Back home in Texas, the initial wave of media attention had died down, but the memory of her actions lingered like a shadow. Friends and family treated her differently, some with cautious sympathy, others with quiet judgment. Even at the grocery store or local coffee shop, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that people recognized her. Though no one said anything directly, she often caught whispers and sideways glances that made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Despite the discomfort, Karen refused to let the incident define her. Instead, she used it as an opportunity for growth. She enrolled in a cultural sensitivity course, determined to learn more about different traditions and customs around the world. The classes were eye-opening, teaching her not only about British etiquette, but also about how to approach unfamiliar situations with curiosity rather than fear. Her instructor, a kind woman named Margaret, encouraged Karen to share her story during group discussions. At first, Karen hesitated, worried about being judged. But when she finally opened up, she was surprised by the support she received from her classmates. Many admitted they might have reacted similarly if placed in her shoes, which helped Karen see her mistake not as a failure, but as a stepping stone toward greater understanding. Karen also took steps to make amends beyond the legal requirements. She sent a handwritten letter to the guard she had pepper sprayed, thanking him again for his forgiveness and expressing gratitude for the lessons his composure had taught her. To her surprise, he replied, not with anger, but with grace. In his note, he acknowledged that the job of a royal guard wasn't always easy, especially when faced with unexpected challenges. "We are trained to remain calm under pressure," he wrote. "But I understand that fear can cloud judgment. I'm glad you've learned from this experience." His words brought tears to Karen's eyes, filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. Determined to turn her misstep into something positive, Karen began sharing her story with others. She gave talks at local community centers, schools, and travel clubs, emphasizing the importance of preparation without paranoia. "Being cautious is good," she told her audiences, "but we must balance caution with respect and openness. Fear shouldn't stop us from experiencing new things. It should guide us to approach them wisely." Her speeches resonated deeply, particularly with fellow travelers who confessed they sometimes felt overwhelmed in foreign settings. Karen became a voice of reason, urging people to step outside their comfort zones while staying mindful of cultural differences. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. One day, while scrolling through social media, Karen stumbled upon a post from a British news outlet highlighting her transformation. The article praised her humility and willingness to take responsibility, calling her a symbol of redemption. Reading those words filled Karen with pride, not because she sought recognition, but because it proved she had grown from the experience. For so long, she had seen herself as Pepper Spray Karen, a walking punchline. Now she realized she was something more, someone capable of change. As time went on, Karen noticed subtle shifts in her own behavior. She became more patient, less quick to jump to conclusions. When a neighbor's dog barked incessantly late at night, she resisted the urge to confront them angrily, instead knocking on their door with a polite request to address the noise. During a family gathering where tensions ran high, she chose empathy over frustration, diffusing arguments before they escalated. These small victories reminded her that personal growth extended far beyond the boundaries of that fateful day in London. Yet, despite all her progress, Karen knew there was still one thing left undone: a trip back to Buckingham Palace. It wasn't just about closure. It was about proving to herself that she could face the place where everything had gone wrong. With trembling hands, she booked a flight to London, unsure of what awaited her. Would the guards remember her? Would tourists recognize her? And most importantly, would she be able to stand there without letting fear take hold? As the plane descended into Heathrow Airport, Karen gripped the armrest tightly, her heart pounding with anticipation. This journey wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it head-on. After all, redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward with courage and grace. Karen's second trip to London marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one defined not by fear or regret, but by growth and understanding. The visit to Buckingham Palace had been cathartic, offering her the closure she desperately needed. But it was the journey home that allowed her to fully process everything she had learned. Sitting on the plane back to Texas, Karen gazed out the window at the endless expanse of clouds below. Her mind replayed the events of the past year, the panic, the mistakes, the redemption, and she realized how much she had changed. Back in her hometown, Karen became known not as Pepper Spray Karen, but as someone who had turned adversity into wisdom. Friends and neighbors noticed the shift in her demeanor. She seemed calmer, more thoughtful, and genuinely interested in others' perspectives. At dinner parties, she shared stories from her travels, weaving lessons about cultural sensitivity and open-mindedness into casual conversations. People listened intently, inspired by her honesty and vulnerability. Even those who had once judged her harshly now saw her as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that everyone makes mistakes, but what truly matters is how we rise after falling. Her newfound confidence extended beyond social settings. Karen began volunteering at a local community center, teaching workshops on safe and respectful travel practices. She emphasized the importance of researching destinations beforehand, respecting local customs, and approaching unfamiliar situations with curiosity rather than fear. Her talks resonated deeply with participants, many of whom were planning their first international trips. One attendee, a young mother named Lisa, approached Karen after a session with tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me courage," Lisa said. "I've always been scared to travel because I didn't want to mess up or offend anyone. But hearing you speak made me realize it's okay to make mistakes, as long as we learn from them." Encouraged by the positive feedback, Karen decided to take her message even further. With the help of a friend who worked in publishing, she wrote a short book titled Lessons from London: How Fear Can Teach Us Courage. The memoir chronicled her experience at Buckingham Palace, delving into the emotions, missteps, and eventual redemption that followed. It wasn't just a recounting of events, it was a heartfelt guide for anyone navigating the complexities of self-doubt and personal growth. When the book hit shelves, it quickly gained traction, earning praise from readers around the world. Many highlighted passages where Karen admitted her flaws, noting how refreshing it was to see someone embrace imperfection so openly. The success of the book brought unexpected opportunities. Karen was invited to speak at conferences, schools, and corporate events, sharing her insights on overcoming fear and fostering empathy. She also partnered with travel organizations to create educational materials aimed at promoting responsible tourism. Through these efforts, she hoped to prevent others from making the same mistakes she had, while encouraging them to step outside their comfort zones. Despite her growing influence, Karen remained grounded. She often reminded herself that her journey wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to live alongside it. On quiet evenings, she would sit on her porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far she had come. The memory of pepper spraying the guard still lingered, but it no longer haunted her. Instead, it served as a powerful reminder of her capacity for change. One day, while scrolling through social media, Karen stumbled upon a photo posted by the British royal family's official account. It showed a group of tourists smiling brightly alongside a royal guard during the changing of the guard ceremony. Beneath the image was a caption that read, "Respectful interactions create unforgettable memories." Karen smiled, feeling a sense of pride knowing she had played a small part in encouraging such moments. Though her actions had once caused chaos, they ultimately sparked meaningful conversations about cultural awareness and mutual respect. As months turned into years, Karen continued to explore the world, visiting places she had once only dreamed of. Each destination taught her something new, reinforcing the idea that life's greatest lessons often come from stepping into the unknown. And though she carried pepper spray with her on rare occasions, it stayed tucked away in her bag, a relic of a different time, a reminder of how far she had come. In the end, Karen's story wasn't just about one reckless decision or its consequences. It was about transformation, the kind that happens when we confront our fears, take responsibility for our actions, and choose to grow. For Karen, that growth had been. The holding area inside Buckingham Palace was nothing like Karen had imagined. The room was small, dimly lit, and sterile, with pale gray walls that seemed to close in on her with every passing minute. A single wooden bench ran along one side of the room, its surface worn smooth from years of use. Karen sat stiffly on the edge of it, her hands cuffed in front of her, her mind racing faster than ever before. The weight of what she'd done pressed down on her chest, making each breath feel heavier than the last. Two officers stood nearby, speaking in low voices as they reviewed the details of the incident. Occasionally, one of them would glance at Karen, their expressions unreadable but undeniably stern. She could hear snippets of their conversation, words like assault, protocol, and disciplinary action. But the full gravity of the situation hadn't fully sunk in yet. All Karen could think about was how surreal everything felt. Just hours ago, she had been an ordinary tourist excited to see the changing of the guard. Now she was sitting in a police holding area, accused of attacking a member of the Queen's Guard. As the minutes dragged on, Karen found herself replaying the events over and over again in her mind. She kept returning to that split second when she pulled the trigger on her pepper spray. Had there been any way to stop herself? Could she have paused long enough to reconsider her actions? The questions swirled endlessly, but no answers came. What was done, and now she had to face the consequences. Eventually, one of the officers approached her, clipboard in hand. "We need your statement," he said curtly, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. His tone wasn't hostile, but it lacked warmth, a reminder that this wasn't a casual chat. It was an interrogation. Karen swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she began, her words spilling out in a rush. I thought he was going to do something. I got scared." Her explanation sounded weak even to her own ears, but she pushed forward anyway. "Back home, I carry pepper spray for safety. I've used it before when I felt threatened. I didn't know it would cause so much trouble." The officer listened without interrupting, jotting down notes as she spoke. When she finished, he leaned back slightly, studying her with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "Let me get this straight," he said slowly. "You're telling me you mistook a ceremonial guard, a soldier who has sworn to protect the public, for a potential attacker?" Karen nodded miserably, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I know it sounds crazy now, but in that moment I honestly believed I was in danger." The officer sighed, shaking his head slightly. "Ma'am, these guards undergo rigorous training. They're here to ensure the safety of everyone, including tourists like yourself. They don't react unless absolutely necessary. It's part of their job. You can't just spray someone because you feel uneasy." His words hit Karen like a punch to the gut. She knew he was right. Her actions had been impulsive and irrational, but hearing it said aloud made her feel even smaller, more foolish. She bowed her head, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I never meant for this to happen." After taking her statement, the officers informed Karen that assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard was considered a serious offense under British law. Depending on the severity of the case, she could face hefty fines or even jail time. The news sent a fresh wave of panic coursing through her. Jail? In a foreign country? The thought was almost too much to bear. Desperate for help, Karen asked if she could contact the U.S. Embassy. The officers agreed, allowing her to make a brief phone call. On the other end of the line, a diplomatic representative listened patiently as Karen explained her predicament. While sympathetic, the official warned her that the situation was delicate and advised her to cooperate fully with local authorities. "This isn't something we can easily fix," the representative said gently. "You'll need to take responsibility for your actions." Hanging up the phone, Karen felt a mix of emotions: fear, shame, and a glimmer of hope that things might somehow work out. As the hours wore on, the reality of her circumstances became clearer. This wasn't just a minor mistake. It was a legal issue with potentially life-altering consequences. And yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, Karen resolved to face whatever came next with honesty and humility. If nothing else, she owed that much to the guard she had wronged, and to herself. The days following Karen's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and soul-searching. After hours in the holding area at Buckingham Palace, she was transferred to a local police station for further questioning. The sterile environment of the station, with its fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, and constant hum of activity felt even more oppressive than the palace grounds. For Karen, it was as though the walls were closing in on her, each tick of the clock reminding her of the gravity of her mistake. At the station, detectives reviewed CCTV footage from the scene, confirming that Karen had indeed pepper-sprayed the guard without provocation. They also interviewed witnesses, many of whom described her actions as reckless or unnecessary. While some expressed sympathy, noting that she seemed genuinely remorseful, others were less forgiving. One witness bluntly told officers, "She caused all this chaos over nothing. Those guards are harmless." As the investigation continued, Karen began working with a lawyer assigned to her case. Her attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Clara, wasted no time laying out the potential consequences. Assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard is taken very seriously here, Clara explained during their first meeting. You're looking at fines, possible community service, and, if things go poorly, even jail time. But if you cooperate fully and show genuine remorse, we might be able to mitigate the penalties. Clara's words hit hard, but they also gave Karen a glimmer of hope. If there was any chance to make amends, she was determined to take it. Under her lawyer's guidance, Karen drafted a heartfelt letter of apology addressed to the injured guard and the British monarchy. In the letter, she expressed deep regret for her actions, acknowledging that her behavior had been driven by fear and misunderstanding rather than malice. She wrote about how she had come to London to experience its culture and history, only to let her anxiety cloud her judgment. "I never intended to disrespect your traditions or harm anyone," she concluded. "Please accept my sincerest apologies." To Karen's relief, the letter was well received. Through her lawyer, she learned that the guard she had sprayed had agreed to forgive her, stating that he understood her reaction stemmed from panic rather than hostility. This act of grace brought tears to Karen's eyes. It was more compassion than she felt she deserved. Still, she knew forgiveness wasn't enough to undo the damage she had caused. As part of her agreement with authorities, Karen agreed to attend mandatory cultural sensitivity training and pay for the guard's medical expenses, which included treatment for temporary eye irritation caused by the pepper spray. Meanwhile, news of the incident spread like wildfire. Within hours, headlines around the world dubbed her Pepper Spray Karen, turning her into an overnight sensation. For all the wrong reasons. Social media exploded with memes and jokes, ranging from lighthearted ribbing to harsh criticism. Some commenters mocked her paranoia, while others condemned her actions as disrespectful to British tradition. Yet surprisingly, not everyone piled on. A number of people defended her, arguing that she had simply made a poor decision under stress. One viral tweet read, "Before you judge, remember, we've all panicked and done something stupid while traveling. Let's give her a break." Encouraged by the mixed response, Karen decided to address the public directly. With her lawyer's approval, she recorded a short video apologizing once again for her actions. Sitting in front of a plain background, she spoke candidly about her fears, her regrets, and the lessons she had learned. "I want to say how sorry I am for what happened," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I let my imagination get the better of me, and I acted without thinking. I hurt someone who was just doing his job, and for that, I'll always feel terrible. Please know that I'm learning from this experience, and I promise to do better." The video resonated with viewers, many of whom appreciated her honesty and vulnerability. Comments flooded in, praising her willingness to own up to her mistakes. Even critics softened their tone, acknowledging that everyone deserves a second chance. For Karen, the positive feedback was bittersweet. While it eased some of the sting of public humiliation, it also reinforced the weight of her responsibility to grow from the experience. By the time her court date arrived, Karen felt drained but resolved. Standing before the judge, she listened intently as the charges against her were read aloud. When given the opportunity to speak, she reiterated her apologies, emphasizing her commitment to making amends. The judge, noting her cooperation and sincere contrition, handed down a lenient sentence, a substantial fine, mandatory community service, and a formal. As palace security officers closed in on Karen, the world around her seemed to blur into a chaotic haze. The once cheerful atmosphere of Buckingham Palace had transformed into a scene of pandemonium. Tourists were scrambling in every direction, some trying to get a better look at what was happening, others desperate to distance themselves from the unfolding drama. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed and confused, while the chatter of excited voices was replaced by gasps, murmurs, and the occasional shout. At the center of it all stood Karen, frozen like a deer caught in headlights, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the questions being hurled at her. "Ma'am, step away from the guard," one of the security officers barked, his tone sharp and commanding. His hand hovered near the radio clipped to his shoulder, ready to call for backup if needed. Another officer knelt beside the affected guard, who was still coughing violently and struggling to regain his composure. A medic arrived moments later, offering assistance as they guided him to a nearby bench. The sight of the guard doubled over in pain only deepened Karen's sense of dread. She watched in horror, her mind replaying the moment she'd sprayed him over and over again. It felt surreal, like watching a movie where she was both the protagonist and the villain. "What were you thinking?" another officer demanded, stepping closer to Karen. His voice was firm but tinged with disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Karen opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her throat felt dry, her thoughts tangled in a web of fear and regret. She wanted to explain herself, to tell them that she hadn't meant to cause harm, that she truly believed she was in danger. But how could she justify pepper spraying a member of the Queen's Guard? Even to her own ears, it sounded absurd. Instead, she simply stood there, clutching the now empty canister in trembling hands, her face flushed with shame. The crowd around her continued to swell, drawn by curiosity and morbid fascination. Some people whispered among themselves, speculating about what might have driven Karen to such an extreme action. Others openly criticized her, their disapproval evident in their scowls and muttered comments. One man shook his head and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Who brings pepper spray to a royal ceremony? This is ridiculous." The comment stung, but Karen barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on the officers surrounding her, their expressions stern and unyielding. Realizing that denial wouldn't help, Karen finally managed to choke out a response. I thought he was going to hurt me," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wasn't moving, and I got scared." Her explanation trailed off, sounding feeble even to her own ears. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, clearly unconvinced by her reasoning. "You're telling us you assaulted a guard because you thought he was dangerous?" one of them asked, raising an eyebrow. "These men are here to protect the public, not harm them. Did you really think he was a threat?" Karen didn't know how to answer. In hindsight, her actions seemed completely irrational. The guard hadn't made a single aggressive move. His only crime had been standing silently at his post. Yet in that fleeting moment of panic, her instincts had overridden logic. Now, faced with the consequences of her decision, she couldn't undo what had been done. All she could do was stand there, humiliated and overwhelmed, as the reality of her situation sank in. Within minutes, 2 more officers joined the group, flanking Karen on either side. "You'll need to come with us," one of them said firmly, gesturing toward a nearby entrance to the palace grounds. Karen nodded numbly, her legs feeling like jelly as she took hesitant steps forward. As she passed through the crowd, she avoided making eye contact with anyone, acutely aware of the stares boring into her. Whispers followed her every move, each word cutting deeper than the last. When they reached the holding area inside the palace complex, Karen was instructed to sit on a hard wooden bench while the officers discussed next steps. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. She had never been in trouble with the law before, let alone in a foreign country. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. For the first time since arriving in London, Karen wished she were anywhere else. As she sat there, surrounded by stern-faced officers and the sterile walls of the holding area, Karen began to reflect on how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. What had started as a dream vacation had turned into a nightmare, one she would likely remember for the rest of her life. But even amid the chaos, a small part of her knew this.